This is the last sequence in the first episode of Sex Education, and basically this installment is going to be the challenges of filming with natural light in the UK. I'm going to call out a lot of stuff to begin with, which we will come back to later on. To start with, we have shadows everywhere. So we got lines coming across like this from the bushes, all of this area just here is in shade. We got lines coming off the people in the background down here. And then we can see on the side of our talent's faces, we've got Eric here. He's got a downside there and he's catching, my goodness, is he catching light? He is on fire on his face. That is bright, bright light and super hard as well. You can see the fall off there from his eye, down his cheek, down his chin. That is really hard, direct light hitting him. And you can see it on everyone else as well. All of their faces are just lit up. Back of this girl's lit up, her bike's lit up. These guys just here, just catching all of that light down frontal, just bright light. Now that means the sun is somewhere over here and it is just beaming out bright hard light. This isn't fake, this is what is happening there. There's no way that they're doing this with a big light because it is catching everything. We've got it playing on this tree in the back, got it playing on the grass, top of the building just here, we've got shadows happening just there, we've got it up in the corner here. So this has to be done for real. And it has to be done pretty early in the day because the sun is pretty low there. To get the shadows that long, you're not going to get that if it's midday. So knowing this, they have a very narrow window to achieve what they need to from this sequence, get all the dialogue out, do several takes with different things, different angles, moving between different actors. It's a lot to try and do within the space of time that you have with the sun there. And there's going to be a couple of cheats. I want to call out the most unrealistic thing in this entire series. Otis's bike lock. Look at that thing. There's no way you're locking up your bike at school with that padlock, let me tell you. As another point, look at the bikes that they've got just here. They are all kind of retro feeling. There isn't a modern kind of mountain bike in the whole school. You wouldn't have that. So it's so much thought going into creating this world that they're living in where the kids aren't on whatever flavor of mountain bike. And the bike loops, look at them. They're kind of painted beige. Now I reckon that they will have painted these for this particular set. I don't think that those bike loops are that colour naturally. Again, I would love to know for sure, but how will we ever find out? So Adam comes in, he's getting hit with that hard direct light. I'll make it red so you can see. He is all down there, downside here, but it is super hard, super harsh. Otis is the only one who's doing quite well out of this. He's just being caught on his back with all of that, and it's kind of bleaching out, but that's fine. Next shot, everything falls apart. There's no direct sunlight in this shot at all. There's nothing on the background. We've kind of genuflected round, so now we're looking at the school building, so maybe we wouldn't be able to see where the sun was coming from before, but the sun should still be coming in kind of from this direction, I figure, because Otis is turned a little bit, but he should still be being hit from that direction, and Adam should be being hit in this direction now. We've got a lot of things to call out within this shot. What they've had to do is cheat because either because of the clouds or because the sun has moved around behind the building, they have lost that direct sunlight for this part of the sequence. Now if we look in Otis's eye, we can actually see a catch light. We don't see it in Adam, so my opinion, because he seems to have a little bit more level down this side than he does the other side, I think that they have a light source kind of just here in between Eric and Adam, so somewhere in this zone, and that is playing on Otis. We have stuff coming in down the side of his face here, we've got the catchlight in his eyes, and he's even got a little bit of a peak on his helmet just there, but the light's coming in underneath it. You could just about make out a shadow line there. Now this is something you're going to encounter if anyone's wearing hats on your productions. If you're doing a cowboy film, they're wearing big brimmed hats, or you're doing something where someone's got a baseball cap on or someone's got a helmet on. you get this effect where you kind of shadow their eyes. It could be really cool, but if you want to see their eyes, if it's light and high-key and teen drama, it might mean that you actually have to bring the light in lower than you would naturally do it to get the eye light in there, because if it's higher up, it's going to get caught by that brim again. Feels like it's coming in fairly straight onto him, maybe with a tiny bit of a downwards direction coming across just there. Catching a little bit of Adam, like we said, but not getting into his eyes because he's turned slightly off this way, so he isn't catching it so much. Nothing in the back just here is getting any direct sunlight. No one else, none of the bushes, that's all just kind of top light happening there from whatever light they have in the sky. Now here we move on to Maeve coming along, and I feel like there's a bit of a change here. There are a couple of things to look at. For a start, we have a little bit more shape to the light now, and everything's coming across really soft, really nice. Down here, catching on Maeve across her hair, down here, and on the back of her jacket. And actually, if you look at her jacket just here, we're also catching some of that warm sunlight that's meant to be there, and indeed is going to be there again in a minute. We're going to see the cheats. On this side of her jacket, we've got the downside, but because she's wearing a leather jacket and it's reflective, we actually see within the reflections lots of blue. And what's going on here is when you have a downside and there's just a lot of blue sky over the top, you do end up catching a lot of blue out of the sky. In fact, if you're ever in a courtyard and it's a sunny day, but there's no direct sunlight in the courtyard, if you look at the top of everyone's heads, you notice that they've got this kind of blue tint to everything. You kind of, if someone's got white hair, they get like a blue rinse in their hair. So she's, because it's a reflective jacket that she's wearing, leather jacket, she's getting a lot of blue in that. If this was me and I was aiming for a slightly moodier, more crafted look, probably what I would do is bring in, say, a 4x4 floppy. You might just about get away with it for these two. Over the top of them and coming down the side, terrible 4x4 floppy there, on a stand. So that would then suck up all of this blue light that's coming in down there and everything off his shoulder just here, and shape his face off a little bit more and her hand off a little bit more and the side of her head off a little bit more. Maybe I'm asking a lot of a 4x4 floppy. Maybe a 2-meter frame of neg would work better. You just scoot that in over the top of them on a diagonal, and then you'd have a more defined downside and you'd take any of that reflected skylight out of them. Depends on what you're going for, and this is just how you could solve that problem. I'm not saying it's an issue for what they're doing here, but it's something that you can look at and you can say, okay, I register that this is something that happens, and then when you're out shooting and you see that someone's got a little bit of blue in their hair, or maybe you don't even notice it, maybe you're just there on a shoot and you go, oh, it's a very blue sky, we're in some shade here. If I don't top them off, I'm going to get to the grade and I'm going to see lots of blue. And you could pull that out in the grade, but it isn't just about the blue light, it's also about the shape. So if you want it to come down a little bit, and it's something you can do physically if you have the equipment and the crew on location to just clean everything up. And cleaning things up will actually help with skin tone, it'll help with consistency. And if you're managing to get that on all of your shots, it's just going to unify everything throughout the entire sequence. Next up, this is where we get into the subterfuge. Look at Maeve. Just look at her. She is glowing. She has the most beautiful light coming in down the side of her face just here, all the way across. Got it down her neck, just there. And then we can see in the background all of this. And over here, and the bokeh, and even on the top of the head just there, and up here, it's still got direct sunlight. Between those sequences, bearing in mind that we cut to a shot which had no direct sunlight, and that happened in between all of the other direct sunlight shots, and in the previous shot, Maeve definitely wasn't being lit like this. She had a little bit of warmth on her, Otis had a little bit of warmth, but it was nowhere near this level. So what I think they've done is taken the first sequence that we saw, and they've also shot this angle of Maeve at the same time. We just skim through quickly and see everything that's going on just here. We can actually work out when this was. Check it out. In the back, we have a shadow line, and this shadow line goes across kind of like that. Now previously there was a girl standing just here, and she was being lit up with direct sunlight. that was all over her and it was casting a shadow from her. But now she is in the shade and we can see the area that is being hit by direct sunlight, because there is still some direct sunlight going on. It's not like it's disappeared, it's just moved around a bit. And that is because, going back to the very first shots in the sequence, the sun has moved. Where before the sun was coming in diagonally across, it has moved around in the sky. So I reckon if we minimize this, we've kind of got a situation where the sun, let's say the sun is starting off just here, and we've got our talent, so Otis is here, Eric is here, and the sun is casting out diagonally across, and you can see all of the other people who are just casting shadows out all the way across this scene just here. As we move around, the sun is going this way, and I feel like the sun gets lost behind the building at that point, and that's where we get that big shadow line coming in, because the sun's behind the building here, and suddenly we've got this line where we are getting some direct sunlight on the background, but not tons. So scooting through to that shot with Maeve, she's still getting sunlight, but it is definitely at a different time. So this is how you cheat with your schedule. If the sun is moving around, try to get what you can and cheat where you actually can't get what you need. Here they're lucky because they still have the background illuminated with the sun, otherwise that would fall down, it wouldn't look anywhere near the same. Here it works well enough that no one's ever really going to notice. All you're really seeing is that Maeve has a more beautiful modelled light on her face. And I think you could approach that in a couple of different ways. I don't think that they're able to just diffuse the sunlight, unfortunately. I think if they had managed to get this shot earlier in the day, you could have just bought in a diffusion frame, stuck it in front of the direct sunlight, and then, yeah, maybe the background's going to be a little bit hot compared to them, but you've done a very quick, very easy diffusion of light that was already there. Because they're not managing to use just the sunlight and diffuse it, they're either having to bounce the sunlight into a diffusion frame from where they can catch it, or they're using an active light source, so say a big HMI, and just blasting that into a diffusion frame, and that's what's giving her that light. Now there are positives and negatives for both of those scenarios. If you were able to bounce the light into a diffusion frame, that's a really cheap way of doing it. You only need a couple of frames, you need the crew to rig them safely, but apart from that, it isn't really that expensive, and it's something that most people could pull off if they had to. If they aren't going with that option and they are going with the active option, then the benefit of the active option is that you set it up, you beam that light onto them through the diffusion frame or whatever softbox or anything that you're using, and then it doesn't change. The ambient level notwithstanding, that light is going to come in at the same angle, the same intensity, so you have longer to get your shot. If you're doing the bounce version, bouncing light and bouncing sunlight is easy enough to do, but it's very tricky to do it consistently over the course of a long dialogue scene. So if you're doing that and you have to do multiple takes, or you have to cut between different angles, then you have to keep changing where the diffuser and the reflector are positioned, and it can get a little bit complicated, and at some point you're probably going to lose your ability to use that light. You're going to go beyond the point you can easily scoop it with the reflector into the diffusion. So there's benefits and drawbacks to both. On one hand you're cheap, on the other hand you're consistent, and you've just got to work out where it sits for you with the shoot that you're doing. We can actually see in her eye just here as well, we've got a really well-defined catch light. That feels super round, so much so that I feel like that is, and I would go as far as to say you could have like a 4-foot silk quite close to Maeve and then be bouncing, I don't know, with a 2-meter silver somewhere off in that sunlight into that silk, and then that's what you get. You get something that looks like that. It's kind of punchy, a little bit hard, but still beautiful, beautiful light. I've actually done a very similar thing to this where we had an interview that I didn't know that I was going to have to do on a fashion shoot. I sat the talent in a little shaded area under a tree on a rope swing, and we had dappled light behind them, kind of like what we've got just here actually. It's very, very similar, where you had some darkness. It wasn't blazing hot sun all the way. They're getting just a soft level on them, but I wanted them to have a bit more of an edge, and I wanted to sit them within the background a little bit better. So I did have a couple of frames with me. I did exactly this. I got a silver bounce, bounced it into a diffusion frame, I think it was 1.25 stop, a lot closer to the talent, and that just gave me a nice, soft, beautiful light all the way wrapping around. If we'd just done the silver, it would have been crazy harsh and it would have been really dazzling for them. If you did white, then you might get something, you might get a catch light, but you wouldn't get the wrap because it was so far away because of where it had to be to actually catch the light. Sometimes it's better to bounce with silver and then diffuse it. It depends on what you're trying to do. Like I say, it can get complicated if you have to do it for more than 10 minutes because the sun does move quite substantially depending on the time of year, time of day. But I love this. This works so well. So we're back to flat here, and then we've got the catch light in our eyes there, and back to flat again when we're basically in the same orientation we were before. So this, where we had Eric on the left and Adam, the bully, in the middle just there, and I said that the light was coming through the middle of the two of them being bounced in. I think that's the same setup actually, and they've just stepped Maeve in, done this shot with her, and kept all of the diffusion frame, bounces, whatever, the same, because we can still see the same catch light in her eyes as we had in his eyes just there. And a little bit down on this side, a little bit down on this side, and it does work. What's interesting is if we skim back through, remember I said that blue light just leaks everywhere? Well, look for a moment at Otis's head and tell me that that isn't some super blue contamination. Either his helmet is leaking blue pigment, or we've just got this blue sky ambience just playing on his hair. I don't think that he has any blue highlights throughout the series. I feel like that is just an example of blue light just catching on his hair, reflecting. It's not getting Maeve so much, but it's really, really playing on him. And that is the last sequence we're going to look at from episode 1. There is an argument, I think, within this whole sequence just here, if you want to justify why there's different lighting to some extent for a narrative purpose. You could say, well, he's the bully, it's super hard lighting, everything's really oppressive. Flips around, okay, they lose the light just here and it all kind of goes to pot. Maeve comes in, she gets a little bit too close, she's being a little bit too intimate. You can tell Otis is a little bit uncomfortable with this, she's touching him, she's really in his face. Gets very, very close, talking to him, it's kind of sensual, she's beautifully lit and she's forcing him to the edge of the frame here and he's kind of hunched up and a little bit nervous. That puts all the power on Maeve, and maybe we're seeing this from Otis's point of view. Maybe it's like Otis sees Maeve like this. It's this angelic look because he's kind of in love with her. She's beautiful, she's powerful, she's confident, and this is how he sees her. If you wanted to make a narrative argument for that, I would say that everything would have to be told a little bit more from his point of view. It doesn't feel like that throughout the series, but if you had to make a narrative argument and you needed to make a narrative argument for something and that was what you were going for, then yeah, sure, you can cheat it like that. It's fascinating really to look at this kind of sequence and see how much you can actually get away with. Whenever I point this stuff out, I'm not pointing it out to say, haha, look at them, they weren't able to make it all match, because if I was in this position, I would have probably done the same thing. I'd have been lucky to get it looking as good as they have here. But knowing why this happens, knowing how you can approach it and deal with it, and how much you can get away with, because cheating light is like Cinematography 101. Backlight is beautiful, so you will have shots where two people are talking to each other, they're facing each other, and each time you cut, they're backlit. It's impossible, but it happens all the time. So knowing what you can cheat, knowing where you can push and pull to make sure that it looks good, or it looks good enough that no one's going to notice, and knowing how you can schedule, especially with actual daylight, knowing how you can schedule and where you can position things, and knowing that you need to get your wide shots first. If you turned up and you did all of the close-up shots while the sun was low in the sky and doing everything that it needed to do, lighting that whole area of the school, and then you tried to move to the wide once the sun had gone behind clouds or gone behind the school building, done. You can't fake it. You can't bring in a light to compete and cover that entire area. So you need to know that you're getting the shots in the right order. And you also need to know that if a cloud does come over, that you can still work and you can still move things around. So maybe if a cloud comes over and it's going to move, but it's not going to move for an hour or two. Maybe you cut into the close-ups, you do those, and then when the sun comes back out, you jump back to the wides. You have to work with your crew on this, and your first AD especially, who's going to be dealing with the scheduling, the talent, keeping everyone on track. It's a bit of a running joke, first ADs being, really strict and super hard on everyone. But if you deviate from that and you're working with natural light, you can find yourself really, really, really up a creek without a paddle, because it is so hard to fake it. And even on big budget films, it's almost impossible to get a convincing daylit look without massive, massive effort in crews, and especially at the front and back ends of the day. The light is beautiful. It's what we love, all of those golden hour and early morning and low sun looks, but they're also the shortest lived, the hardest to keep consistent, and when you're cutting to multiple angles, it can be an absolute nightmare. So think about those things, think about flagging, think about blue light from the sky, think about where you're orienting things relative to the background so that you can keep the background looking sunlit. Maybe you're actually constantly turning yourself around as you shoot to keep the sunlight in the back. But whatever you've got to do, and you've got to make sure that you do location scouts, make sure you know where the sun's going to be, and make sure you know how low the sun's going to get, because sometimes things will happen, like it will just dip behind a tree that you didn't think it was going to dip behind. So using an app, having a good idea of where that's going to be, can absolutely save your ass when you come to a shoot like this. We're going to proceed with episode 2. I might be dotting different series and films throughout this, because I don't want to focus too much on any one series, because it ends up being like a 5-month ordeal of getting through that, and I do want to keep it fresh and interesting. If anyone has any questions, drop them down below. This has been episode 1 of Sex Education. If you haven't watched it already, I do thoroughly recommend it. It's quite a lot of fun, and Gillian Anderson's great. I just love Gillian Anderson.